Welcome to Directionally Correct, a people analytics podcast with Cole and Scott, and today's guest, Gina Thoebes, VP of Organizational Performance at the Arizona Cardinals NFL football team. Hey, Directionally Correct fans. If you're looking to stay connected to the podcast, make sure to subscribe to our Substack newsletter, watch our videos on YouTube, or listen to the podcast on your app of choice. This podcast is dedicated to you to help educate and entertain you on how to effectively do people analytics. We are a listener-supported podcast, so please consider becoming a patron. If you'd like to support the podcast by becoming a patron, you can find a link to sign up in the show notes or at patron.podbean.com/directionallycorrect. Thanks for being a listener. All opinions are our own and do not reflect those of any other organization. Gina Thoebes, good to see you.
Nice to see you, Cole Napper. Hey, by the way, my son thinks your name is snazzy. He asked me who I was going on a podcast with, and I said, my friend Cole, and he's like, that's a snazzy name.
Well, I got a snazzy name and a snazzy outfit today.
I love your outfit. Way to shout out.
So for those of you who are listening on audio only, I'm wearing all Arizona Cardinals gear that Gina so graciously sent over to me. And if this is not indicative of it, I do accept bribes. So if any other listeners want to send me things, I will graciously take it. But Gina, I'm so glad to have you here today. I was thinking about, I don't know, we could go a lot of different directions with the podcast, but I was thinking maybe we start out with just like leadership development. What is leadership development, and how did you, in your career, how did you get into this space?
That's the first question is really big. So I'll try and keep it concise. And when I think about leadership development, I think about the what and the how. So I'll start with the what. What's really important for developing leaders is that we get them focused on like 3 buckets of things. So awareness, self-awareness, other awareness, building their own leadership identity. And then the next thing would be capabilities. So knowledge, skills, knowing how to do the things leaders need to do, such as build trust, provide feedback, so many important skills that leaders need to build. And I also think knowledge of general psychology, a basic knowledge of how people are motivated, social psychology, how people work in groups is really important to be an effective leader. And then the third bucket that I would put in the what would be versatility. I'm a huge fan of Rob Kaiser's work and the LVI, and I really believe that the most effective leaders build off their self and other awareness and have built up enough knowledge and skills that they can read situations and then adjust their style accordingly based on the demands of the situation. And then for the how, oh, sorry, did you have a question?
No, I was just saying, you finish up and then I'll ask.
Okay. And then for the how, I really recommend people grapple with these concepts. You have to practice. It's got to be experimental. It should not be passive. You've got to try these things out. Leadership development should be uncomfortable. You shouldn't be just passively enjoying a presentation.
Well, you mentioned Rob Kaiser. Who is he and what is his framework, and why should people utilize that type of information?
I don't have a full background on Rob to provide you, but he's definitely
I was thinking maybe 20 seconds.
He's one of the people that I look up to in the leadership arena for sure. So he developed the Leadership Versatility Index, which is a 360-degree feedback tool that you can use to develop leaders. And it really plays on these tensions of how do we make sure that people are both enabling growth from others while also driving performance and playing those tensions. But I mean, he's a scholar. I don't know how long he's been in the game. He's been in the game a long time. And is a practitioner. He really does. He blends that practitioner scholar gap really well. So all of his stuff is very evidence-based, but also really practical and easy to use in an organizational setting.
Well, I would go as far to say, I've only met him once, and it was at dinner with you. And he was a very gregarious individual, loud and boisterous and fun. And I really enjoyed meeting him. And so wanted to give him a shout out. And it was great meeting you at that dinner, by the way. So, it's funny how the worlds collide at PsyOps sometimes. But I wanted to ask you a question about So I wanted to kind of tee up the foundation of like what is leadership development, why it matters, because you've applied that in a few really interesting scenarios. I'd like to kind of start out with the present and work our way backwards. But like, how does leadership development play a role in an NFL organization?
Yeah. So, leadership development is a huge part of my role right now at the Arizona Cardinals. We're just in the thick of launching our own signature leadership development program. But I think one of the things that we realize really well in professional sports is that we have to practice and develop our skills and focus on continuous improvement. And so we're really, really focused on getting all of our leaders and beyond the field, right? The business office, really focusing on all the things that a lot of fans might not have front of mind, all of the marketing, all the brand development, corporate partnerships, ticket sales and service, our amazing creative teams that create all of the cool graphics and videos and things that you see out there. Those are all filled with leaders, and we're in a really high stakes environment where it's very, very public. So we need the highest level of leaders who feel confident, who can act quickly and have good strategies to tackle tough problems.
Yeah, I think it was probably over a year ago. We had Charles Sherbaum and Harold Goldstein on the podcast to talk about the work that they do in the NFL Combine in terms of selecting folks. Presumably, leadership is one component of that. And I always think about things like I wrote an article a while ago about peak performance and its relationship, and I think I referenced a lot of stuff from God, what is his name? The guy who did the meta analysis on IQ, but he had done some work earlier on peak performance. Sorry, it's escaping me. He's one of our previous guests as well. And I'm curious, how does the role of leadership development play a role again in an NFL organization in terms of achieving peak performance and taking people to the next level in terms of their ability to do their jobs effectively?
Yeah, I think that, one of the number one things that leaders need to understand is how to build and drive effective, high performing teams. And so that's something that we focus on in leadership development is getting people this understanding of how teams work and individuals and how to get people posed for peak performance. I actually just did a coaching session yesterday where we were talking about how do we get my team to peak performance and leveraging what we know about driving people, but also knowing that we need stillness and we need to build in rest and intentional reflection to drive peak performance. And sometimes you don't think about that as a leader. You're just like, go, 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 objectives. And so for leadership development, I think it really allows us to hit our objectives because, you can try without strategy to hit your objectives and with leaders who think some leaders have natural interpersonal skills, but I think it's a lot beyond just being good with people to manage a lot of the tensions that you face in leadership to drive great results while also helping people thrive and be engaged and not burned out.
Absolutely. And I remember the person is Paul Sackett. I don't know how I could forget his name earlier. Yeah, that's a big miss on my part. And one of the things I thought was interesting, and I don't know if it's only the Arizona Cardinals, but I believe it's either only the Arizona Cardinals or maybe just a few other teams. But I don't think any other NFL organizations actually have your role. Is that correct? And if they're out there listening, why should they, either try to poach you to get them to create it at their own organization? Don't do that. Don't do that. But why should they be adopting these type of things for their NFL organization as well?
Yeah. So, yes, when I accepted this position, they did a national search for it, and they were very clearly saying that this was the first of its kind in the NFL. No other vice presidents of organizational performance have I yet to meet. So, if you're out there hiding, please come find me so that we can be friends. I found a couple related positions in other professional sports areas. So, I just met somebody who's the director of organizational performance at the Detroit Pistons, but there's not much out there. And I think when they created this position at the Cardinals, they had this dream of having this internal resource that they've been using consulting for. Like, how can we have somebody who both understands talent management and strategy, but also has boots on the ground leadership experience and can serve as an internal coach? And it has been huge for us. I actually have a wait list of people who are waiting to engage with coaching in the Cardinals. I can't meet the demand, so we're trying to figure out better ways to be able, we're doing group coaching, team coaching, things that we can do to meet the demand, but it's been really beneficial.
No, that is so awesome. And you've kind of been hitting on it a little bit here and there throughout the conversation, but can you just talk about like what does a VP of organizational performance do for an organization? And specifically, how do you develop leaders? And you just mentioned a few different pathways there, but how do you develop leaders?
Yeah. So specifically for my role, I am over all things talent management. And so I'll break it down into chunks like designing performance management and our ongoing development systems. So we have annual evaluations, but also what do our one-on-ones look like? What do our continual feedback processes look like? And then also employee engagement, leading our strategies there, trying to work on developing some people analytics in there too, so that we can get some insights from our HR data to make good decisions, building strategy. So I just had a great fun session where we're trying to build out a 3 to 5 year strategy on what do we want for talent management and the future of our talent practices to serve our organizational objectives and where we're going. And then for me, uniquely too, I'm also working as an internal coach. And so supporting leaders through executive coaching and executive development, which leads me into your next question of how do I develop leaders? I think one of the first things that I do is try and use some kind of assessment to be able to help them understand where they are currently. And then we have really great dialogue about where they want to be. At the Cardinals, we've got a great behavioral competency framework that lays out where we want to be. And so that's helpful for us to be able to see, okay, where are we? And then aspirationally, how can we focus our development on the key areas that you need to develop in? And then through active and appreciative inquiry in coaching, and then also skill building and really working to help people experiment with new behaviors, try them out, gather feedback, and start building a new identity of themselves in these new leadership behaviors and how they see themselves as a leader.
Does science and data play a role in this in any way? And how does your background play into this in addition to that?
Yeah, I think science is incredibly important in this. So I just actually had a wonderful conversation with David Day from Claremont McKenna, who's a leadership development like scholar who, if you're into leadership development, you should be reading his work. It's amazing. But he was saying that one of the pitfalls that a lot of organizations can like fall into is falling into leadertainment. So thinking that leadership development stuff that's entertaining is helpful. And I think all leadership development needs to be grounded in the science and the research of one, how do adults develop? Two, what are leadership behaviors that actually drive effective teams and results? And so it's important to use good, valid assessments that help with that. And then also be teaching leaders evidence-based practices to utilize as they lead their teams.
That's fascinating. Well, maybe I don't know. We could go a few different directions. I One thing I'm always curious about. I always like stirring the pot. Is there a way of doing leadership development wrong? Like, are there people failing at this? And what are they doing?
Yeah, I'm not going to call out anybody specifically at their failing, but I think one of the things I already talked about, Cole, is if people are doing just lecture style based didactic training for leaders, I think that's a failure. I think incorporating parts of that, obviously, we need to absorb information. That's important, but we have to be trying. You have to learn to be a leader through doing, and it's a social activity and you need to try things out with your team. So anytime I do leadership development, it always involves awkwardly trying out new behaviors. And people don't love that, right? Nobody really loves a role play. But again, leaning into the uncomfort and practicing those things and then having follow-ups to try these out with your teams. So I'd say the passive stuff, falling into the pitfall of what is popular and marketed out there, anything that says that like it is the solution for everything. I think it's easy to fall into that in the business world. There's so many people willing to sell you the latest and greatest in leadership about development. And if it's not rooted in science, I think you're doing it wrong. If it's not challenging people to practice, I think you're doing it wrong. And also, I think if you're just trying to color code people and put them into groups, I think you're doing it wrong.
Well, you've practiced this in a sports organization that's trying to again achieve peak performance. Before this, you were doing that in another context to try to achieve peak performance, which is in the medical field. In the Cleveland Clinic, who, again, from my knowledge, is one of the most cutting edge, research and practice fields for, advanced surgical techniques and things like that. Can you talk about doing this type of work at the Cleveland Clinic as well?
Yeah, so I felt so fortunate to get to work with the leaders at the Cleveland Clinic because you're right, the amazing minds and people who are working at Cleveland Clinic and they're doing such cool things. We had a giant quantum computer on campus that we would walk by as we're going to things, and I just was always in awe of that. And it was really fun to do it in that context. I think, especially because the people at Cleveland Clinic, it's an academic medical center. So they appreciate rigor. So anytime we were designing anything in terms of leadership development or anything in terms of, I spent a lot of my time in measurement strategies for leadership development at Cleveland Clinic there. And they were allowing me to do applied research around it. The things that most organizations would be like, no more than, 4 or 5 survey items, please. They really wanted applied research to make sure that what they were doing was evidence-based and having the impact that they wanted. So that was really fun to have people who match that level of how can we do this right? We really care about science. Got to work with Scott Tannenbaum and bring him in to do some teams work there and develop their teams programming. And that's again a place where it's really easy to get away from the science. So many popular solutions out there that aren't based on the science of teams, but Cleveland Clinic was eager to do it right and embrace the research-based approach.
Absolutely. And then before that, I think you were at Macy's. Now, that was a little different and weirder. You want to give me some stories about your time at Macy's? And I think that was that even before your graduate training?
Yes, yes. So
Okay.
that was like a previous life, Cole. I honestly call it a previous life. So I came straight out of undergraduate and thinking I wanted, like many IO psychologists, thinking I wanted to go into clinical psychology, but it just didn't feel completely correct. And so I started working at Macy's, I think my junior year in college, and I just kept getting promoted there. And I think it's probably because I had a lot of success leading people. I use I use psychology to help motivate people and create a fun work environment. And it turned into a 12-year leadership journey. So starting from a part-time clinique sales associate there, just as like a fun job to like pay for fun on the weekends. And then got approached about leadership and was like, okay, hey, I can take a break and not go to grad school for a moment and enjoy being financially stable and have a career, and fell in love with leadership. And that's kind of what sparked my whole journey into what I'm doing now, is that I loved the opportunity to create and work with teams to be a leader and see the positive impact I could have in creating a fun work environment. And then when I got to go to that level up and start developing leaders, that's when I was like, this is my favorite thing, getting to coach and develop people and see them step into their own leadership identity is my favorite thing and still fuels my work today.
Does anything crazy happen in retail?
We could have a whole podcast series on that. So many crazy things happen in retail. How weird do you want to get right now?
I want to get super weird.
Okay, we can get super weird. So I'll give you a choice. I have two interesting stories. One's like drama intense, and one is like inappropriate funny. Where do you want to go first?
I mean, I think you know where I want to go, but I'm going to let you choose.
Inappropriate funny?
Let's see. Let's see
Did
how
I
it goes.
pick? Did I pick right?
We can always edit this part out.
Okay, so in my first store that I managed in Oregon, I had this amazing little sales manager team. It was like a $20 million store, so I had I think like 6 or 7 sales managers. We were very like a group of really tight knit, wonderful like young professionals working. And I had one sales manager on my team who was just incredible. He was like one of the most incredibly wholesome people. I don't think he ever said a curse word in his life, like just genuinely wholesome. Was a pastor on the weekends. So just like very, very wholesome. And I am in my office one day. I'm going to be laughing through this, so I'm going to try and keep it together. I'm in my office, and another sales manager comes with him, and he looks like he's seen a ghost. Like he looks like completely upset. And the other sales manager's crying, laughing. She's just dying, laughing. And she's like, "You have got to hear what just happened." So apparently, my sales manager, his name's Jason, took a phone call from a customer who was crying and screaming hysterically, like on the phone, like, help, you've got to help me. Like, what's going on? This isn't okay. I need your help. And he's like, ma'am, how can I help you? What's going on? What has happened? Like, we will help you. Your product, it's burning me. It's burning me. And he's like, okay, well, whatever it is, stop touching it. Like, get away from it. Like, do you need me to call 911? Like, what is going on? And she's like, no, it's your underwear. It's your underwear. It's burning me. I don't know why it's burning me. And and he's like, well, take it off. Like, ma'am, like, please, like,
Oh
what's
God.
hurting you? And she's like, I haven't taken it off in 7 days. I can't take it off. It's burning me.
Whoa.
And I'm like, so this is like the most ridiculous thing. He can't even tell me what she was saying on the phone. They're trying to talk to me. The sales manager's crying. He's in tears. We think hopefully she was pranking us. We don't know, but she seemed really, really serious. Apparently, he was on the phone with her for 20 minutes about this underwear and how it was burning her. And I think that he was probably still traumatized from this event.
I'm still traumatized.
I told you it was weird.
Yeah, that's funny. That's super funny. Well, I don't even know how to get us back on track now. Um, well, let's do like a really hard pivot. I
Okay.
think I can't even do it. Um, you said you're into mindfulness. you, you were
Right. It's a perfect segue from
perfect segue into mindfulness. So,
damn.
how does that relate to leader development, or what? I don't know. Why are you into that?
Yeah. Well, I started mindfulness during COVID. So back in 2020, when COVID launched, I was in the year where I was going through getting ready for comps for my grad program. I had two kids who I was homeschooling, and I had an internship that I was working. And so I was in the thick of it. It was really, really challenging time. I got into mindfulness to, I don't know, keep myself sane. That and weight training truly kept me sane. But I also think I've always been really cerebral and in my head, like lots and lots of thoughts. And I've wanted to, as a person, be more grounded in my body and not so in my thoughts all the time. And so mindfulness really, really helped me with that. It was incredibly hard to do at first, Cole. Like at first, a minute or two of it felt like insanity, but I've built up my practice and I actually have a streak going. I think I'm like 4 years. I have meditated every single day, and I guard that streak like it's precious for me, and it really helps. And I think I actually incorporated mindfulness into my dissertation because I was so passionate about
Oh, wow.
mindfulness. And then also I use it in leadership development because one of the things that I think leaders need to leverage to be successful is to not act from a place of reactivity. And so mindfulness really helps people to take a pause, take a breath, and then react with intent, like act with intention rather than react with emotion. Because in high stakes moments or with teams, you sometimes can break trust really quickly and it's really hard to get that back. So, those powerful moments and understanding how to ground yourself and pause, I feel like is a superpower for leaders.
And is this a part of your coaching practice as well? And I think you told me that you're actually expanding your coaching practice as well, right?
Yes, it is a big part of my coaching practice if clients are interested. So in my executive coaching practice, the clients take the lead. They get to decide what we're doing,
Hmm.
more so than like leadership development, where I'm like, here's where we need to focus. So if they tell me they're stressed or they're reactive, I'll set up some options and we'll experiment with mindfulness. I've worked with some clients on trying out box breathing, doing intentional reflection before high stakes meetings and moments, even progressive muscle relaxation for people who are dealing with high stress situations. And I am expanding my coaching practice. It is live now. It's coaching and executive development. So I'm very excited about that.
Well, that is exciting. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, one thing I think about. So tell me. I'm about to tell you a quick narrative, and you tell me if this is wrong. How about that? So earlier in my career, at a few different organizations, I'd done some research on what it takes to be a good leader for a first time leader. And the research that I'd done basically came to the conclusion that when people become leaders, and it's not 100%, but I'm just going to act like it's 100%. When people become new leaders, all of them are bad. And then the only difference between a good leader and a bad leader is a bad leader will continue to stay bad and continue to do the things that they've always done. And a good leader will actually make the effort to change from being a bad leader to becoming a good leader. Is that true? And from your experience and the research that you've done? And second of all, how do you take a person from being a bad leader to a good leader?
Yeah, I think elements of that are true. I think some people start further out ahead of others in leadership because they have better interpersonal skills.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to perspective take, like, right, EQ, IQ, if you're ahead in that and you understand how to connect and relate to people, you have a head start because leadership is really how do you exert influence and how do you get people to want to do what you want them to do and structure work. So I feel like that gives you a head start. But yes, I think especially as you grow and develop throughout your career, every single time you level up, your behaviors, your strategies, they need to evolve. So if you're not constantly learning from experience and seeking and striving to improve and understand what you don't know and how to get better, you're going to top out and not do well in leadership. And how do we take how do we take bad leaders to good? I think the first part, going back to what I said before, awareness, they need to know that they're bad, right? If you don't think that you're bad and you don't have a compelling reason to change, you're just going to keep going. You're just going to keep rolling. So you're going to need some kind of information, whether it's feedback, poor results, something that's going to knock you out of your comfort zone and gets you that motivation to evolve.
Absolutely. Well, you and I have a little bit of an announcement to make, right? Don't we, Gina?
Ooh, are we doing it here?
I think we're doing it here. Well, I'll go ahead and I'll do it, and then we can kind of move on to the next segment. But one of the things that's really exciting is in the process of creating a data-driven HR academy, and I am so thrilled to include Gina, who's going to be in charge of the leader track of that. It's going to be loosely based on my book that's coming out about people analytics here very shortly. I'll be responsible for that part of the training. Gina's going to lead our leader track. Alexis Fink will be leading our strategy track as an amazing leader previously at Meta. And then Sonali Kumar will be leading our technical track. And she was a pretty recent guest on the podcast, so people can go check out her episode. But I'm super thrilled to have you involved. And I see you as, like, again, at the pinnacle of this type of work, Gina. So super excited. One question related to that, though. Is there anything different about being a leader in HR and trying to do data-driven HR or people analytics than being just a generic leader anywhere?
Yeah. Well, I think there are components to leadership that are the same across industries, but I think that there are some really unique challenges when it comes to what situations you're put in based on what industry you're in. And actually, Cole, I want to throw that question back to you because from your experience being a people analytics leader, what have you seen people grapple with and have these challenges with? I'd love your expertise on this.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I would say that there used to be this graph that went around all the time, like 5, 6, 7 years ago, and it was about three overlapping circles about how to do people analytics effectively. It was like data science, research, and domain expertise about HR, and there were different versions of it, but that's like a simplified version. I would say the one thing that's different about people analytics leadership is the domain expertise component of that is quite different. And you have to understand, like, if you're a leader in a business, you can just go do things. But if you're a leader in people analytics, you have to influence other people to do things. You don't get to just go do things. And I think that's a completely different skill set of trying to influence, but also the components of it that are related to understanding HR, understanding data. All of that is necessary. Like, I don't think you can just plop down a really good leader over people analytics and just expect them to be successful if they lack those types of skills. But I don't know. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like there are similar parallels in other areas of HR leadership, like talent management and everything. We're not usually executing as much. We have to influence through, and so influence skills, and also really understanding the systems and how they relate to each other. I think systems thinking is really important there as well.
Absolutely. Well, Gina, I think we wanted to try something out here too. Did you
Oh,
want to?
yay!
Yeah, do you want to take a stab at? So this is a test balloon. We're running this. So this goes horribly. First of all, you'll probably never hear about it, but second of all, you'll never see it again. But I was going to give Gina a chance to interview me on this episode. So I don't know. Did you have any questions for me today? I have no idea what you're going to ask me about if you do.
Yeah, I want to talk about your book, Cole. That's what I'm
Okay.
really excited to hear about. So, can we go there?
Yeah, if you want to.
Yeah, I absolutely would like to go there. So, talk to me about your book. What inspired you to write this book?
Yeah, and we do have an episode coming out when the book launches, but I'll go into a little bit. I'll say the inspiration was a lack of inspiration. I actually really didn't want to write the book originally. Not like this book, but I just didn't want to write a book. Was kind of the problem, and I always also sort of felt like it was sort of an old technology, and I was really fearful that AI was just going to come in and like make the concept of a book obsolete while I was writing it, and I feel really dumb for doing that. Um, but I think the biggest part of it is I have always had this issue that I think that there's multiple ways to do people analytics effectively, but there's also multiple ways to not do people analytics effectively. And I feel like too much of the advice that's given out there is just for organizations that have like 50 and 100-person people analytics teams and tens of millions of dollars of resources, and it's like unless you can act in these ways, you're not going to be successful. And I just didn't think that was true. And so I just wanted to write a book that said putting creating business value at the core of people analytics, how to do that at organizations of all sizes, and then with the introduction of generative AI, to be able to use generative AI to help. Like sometimes it's called the laggards advantage. So somebody who is like a late adopter coming in and usurping or passing everyone who was an early adopter. I think there's an opportunity with generative AI for the laggards advantage to really play a role of like, okay, you haven't made the investment yet. Great. Now's the best time to do it in history. And so I just kind of wanted to lay out a playbook for how to do that effectively and how to just be good at people analytics if even if you have 5 or 10 people doing it.
Yeah, I think that's so important because I think there are many, many organizations out there who are looking for some kind of guidance, a little bit of a recipe to get started because they know they need to get started, but they don't know how. Because you're so correct. Like, we are not going to have a team of 50 or 100 people work
Yeah,
on this. So, talk to me about what it was like to write this book, right? What was the experience like?
it was rough. I mean, it was no, because I think I've told this before on the podcast, or maybe I haven't. I don't know. Um, I so they get the book publisher gave me a contract to sign in I think roughly April of 2024, and the book was going to be due in March of 2025. And so I just when they gave me the contract, I just sat on it for months. I was like, I don't know if I want to do this or not. So I think sometime in the September October timeframe, the publisher reached back out to me and said, "Hey, you haven't signed this contract yet. If you don't sign it now, we're withdrawing it." And so I said, "Okay, I'll sign it." But I assumed that that meant that the due date for the book got cascaded again a year into the future. It did not. And so I essentially had from October through March 1st, so basically all of February, to write the book, which is like half the amount of time that I needed. And so I was up, 5 a.m., 7 days a week, every day, writing until work started. And then on the weekends, I would again get up at 5 a.m. and write till 1 p.m. in the afternoon on Saturday and Sunday. That went on for months. And frankly, I was very burned out during that time frame. And so wouldn't suggest, 0 stars, like would not recommend, don't do it that way. But I will say what it did do is it kind of got me excited about some of these topics that either I already kind of like had a predisposition against or that I was kind of burned out about talking about. Because what I wasn't trying to do is to, some people will just really, they'll cut a book into sections or chapters, and then they'll just talk about that section in isolation. And the biggest thing that I wanted to do is yeah, I'm going to have a bunch of chapters, but I want to weave together an entire narrative about how to do this effectively. And that became quite exciting to do in that process. And I think if I had spread it out over too long of a period of time, I would not have been able to do that as effectively.
Yeah, yeah. So like the energy expenditure and the pure focus that you had to do, obviously like draining because you not like you've got to stop your day job and you have a family too. So all of those
Yeah.
things don't go away. But it sounds like it allowed you to have some kind of congruence working through this where it wasn't broke up and
Yeah.
it maybe flowed well.
I mean, I remember I had a week, it was a week before the book was due, and I had written all the chapters, and I essentially had to go through the entire book in a week and finish it. And it was not close to being finished. And so there is a lot of congruence just from the fact that I was literally for an entire week diving deep. And I will say also that fear of failure is a powerful motivator. And for me, at least. And yeah. So I just wanted to make sure that when I submitted it, it wasn't the worst thing I've ever done.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm excited for it. Seems like it's been doing good so far with pre-sales.
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't technically come out yet, but it did make it up some lists on Amazon and things like that, which was neat. I think it was like a data science list and then an HR list, and then maybe like 3 or 4 other lists. It made it to number one in pre-sales there for a little while, so I was pretty excited about that.
Yeah, yeah. I saw that. That is exciting. Well, I can't wait for it to come out. I'm excited to read it.
Yeah,
So switching away from your book, do you want me to keep going? Shall I keep interviewing you, or do you
let's
want to
do
go to a
one
different
more, and
segment?
then we can go into Cole's corner. How about that?
Sounds great. Okay, so
I
I
feel
want to
like
hear.
I'm boring people.
I don't think we're going to be boring people. I want to hear a hot take from you in people analytics right now. What's something that you think people are getting wrong?
Ooh, okay. Here's something. I was talking to somebody about this at a leading tech company yesterday. They basically asked me the question of like, what should people analytics be doing right now? One of the things, the context of it is I've been saying a lot things like dashboards and SQL queries and writing reports and all of that kind of stuff. Well, that's going to go away with generative AI. And so, like, what do you do instead? And I think the hot take that I have is that people analytics has really 3 options for how to move forward. One is if you're an organization that's just not adopting AI, just keep doing what you're doing, right? Like the status quo is fine in those type of organizations. But if you're an organization who's trying to kind of lean into the future and be proactive, I would say one is this concept of there's a lot of these transformation functions creeping up, but what I would call them is generative AI and HR functions. So it's like, how do you introduce generative AI to the function from a technology standpoint? And I think that is going to be a key position that people analytics can actually make a logical transition into very effectively. And the person I was talking to, we kind of split it into 2 categories. There's like infrastructure and then there's strategy. And I also think that people analytics has the chance to assume leadership during this time frame because I don't think really any other part of HR is prepared for this type of transformation. And so if it wants to go the infrastructure route and say we're going to be the implementers of generative AI, we're going to help with that transformation, that's great. But if it wants to be the one that says here's how to run an operating model based on generative AI, and who's going to lead that operating model, guess who it's going to be? It's going to be people analytics. And so I think that's somewhat of a hot take there because I've mentioned it in a few settings and everybody's like, yeah, that's not going to happen. But I actually think it's really important. And one of the reasons, I guess this is the hottest take of it, is I think the traditional HR leader is a dinosaur. And I do not think they're prepared for this. I do think they're going to rest on their laurels. I do think that they are not going to change as quickly as the technology is going to change. And you're going to need a digitally native, AI native type function like people analytics to truly capture this. Because the thing that I see happening is organizations, they've never really like wanted HR. It was always kind of foisted on them, like they didn't. And so they would rather just, technology come along and just replace the whole thing. And I just don't think that that's feasible, at least in like the next 10 years, let's say. But what they are going to be looking for is who are the leaders in HR who can transform from within. Or what's going to happen is they're going to be forced to transform from people outside of HR. And I think that the second of those categories is a worse option. And so if you're going to transform within, it's going to come from functions like people analytics.
Nice. I like that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Gina, I don't know how that experiment went. We'll see if it makes the cut. But let's try. Let's do some Cole's Corner. You want to join me in Cole's Corner?
Absolutely.
Welcome to Cole's Corner. All right, I do have a context clue question. Who is the Arizona Cardinals' biggest rival?
Seattle Seahawks.
All right. So, since we know that you love the Arizona Cardinals, you cannot use them as the answer. Who is the best NFL team between the Dallas Cowboys, the New Orleans Saints, and the Seattle Seahawks, and why?
Ah. Oh, you've stumped me. You've stumped me on this one.
This is your chance. I'm literally wearing a Cardinals outfit. You could return the tennis ball and just say the Cowboys, and we can move on, and I could just be so happy.
I honestly don't have an opinion. Like you picked. I don't have
I
an
purposely
opinion.
picked teams I knew you had no connection to, but that
Right? I'm like,
I would care about. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, that's really challenging. And I don't know. Well, obviously, I'm not picking the Seahawks. We
Yeah,
know
I
that.
know.
We know that. So I grew up a 49ers fan. So just saying the Cowboys feels wrong too. Uh,
Well, I think we're a process of elimination. We're going with the Saints. Is that fair?
I don't think so, though. I mean,
Put
what are
you to
these
sleep.
choices that you gave me, Cole? I don't know. I don't know.
This is my favorite. I love this.
You like seeing me sweat and not know how to answer it.
All right, I'll give you the diplomatic immunity here, where you don't have
Okay.
to answer because you work for a competing organization.
Right? I was like, I'm like, am I going to say something that's going to be perceived
Yeah,
negatively?
no, we're good. I got the next one for you. So,
Okay.
what's the place that you have never been to that you'd most like to go, and why?
So on my bucket list, where I really, really want to go is Greece. I really do, and I've seen some people going there recently, and I've just been like, God, I can't wait to go. I love Greek food. I think Greek people are incredibly warm and amazing and fun, and just every time I see a picture of the blue water and the white buildings and the landscape, I'm like, that's what heaven looks like. That's where I need to be. So I'm very excited to go to Greece and experience the amazing culture and food and breathtaking landscapes.
Do you have a time frame in mind, or are you just this is hopefully sometime in the future?
I don't know. My kids are still relatively young, and so I don't know how much I want to take them on a flight to Europe right now. A 5 hour flight feels like the max for them right now, and while maintaining my sanity. But hopefully, when they're a little bit older, maybe in a few years. Yeah.
Absolutely. Why do you do what you do?
Hmm. I love this question. And I always enjoy hearing your guests answer this question too. I think for me, leadership
And funny
development.
enough, before you answer, I was like, funny enough, the weirdest thing to me is how many people come in and really struggle with this question, like you struggle with the Cowboys versus the Saints versus the Seahawks.
Well, so that's funny to me because if you get like I'm an opinionated person, but if you give me options that I'm not emotionally invested in, I'm not gonna argue for the sake of arguing about it. I'm like I was literally trying to think about like, do I know their coaches? Do I know like what do I like how could I objectively like think about who is a better team? And so like my mind was like going into analysis mode of like how do I do this? And then also like PR mode. But for why I do what I do, people struggling with it, that's interesting to me. I feel like they need to spend time reflecting on that if that's not genuine. I think it's been really clear for me growing up the impact of what great leadership has. I've worked under really phenomenal leaders. I've worked under leaders where it was a hard place to be. And the ripple effect of what that would do to my life and the other people around you, right? Great. There's been a recent research study that came out and showed that leaders affect people's mental health as much as their spouses do. So that's the ripple effect of leadership. And so I view it as a really big, amazing responsibility and a way to impact the world positively. So I love getting to help leaders step into feeling confident and creating great, engaging teams. And then also, when it comes to coaching, my favorite thing about coaching is that coaching is like getting to witness growth and transformation that you would never really get to see. It's wildly like intimate that you get to be with people. They trust you and you get to be there to reflect and be present as they transform and evolve and move towards their goals. And I just think that's the coolest thing. And I love to be a part of it.
That's awesome. That's so cool. Well, I got one big question for you, and it is, how do you stay grounded in science now that you're out in the working world? Is it important to do so? And do you ever struggle with going native once you've left an academic environment?
um I I think it's really important to keep reading articles. I actually make an effort to read at least a few articles in leadership development or coaching weekly. I've signed up for some newsletters and other things from thought leaders that are backed in like academic backgrounds so that it's not just, fluff. But I think it's really important. I want to stay in touch with it. I do a lot of reading as well. My commute, I'm always either doing podcasts or audiobooks. So I like to really dig in there on like what evidence-based books we can read. I'm gonna slander. Is it Rothelberg?
Yeah, the guy
Yeah.
that talked about meetings.
Yes, yes. So I just listened to that one, and I mean, I know enough about one-on-one meetings, but I really enjoyed that because he goes so deep into the research, and I was able to pluck some great nuggets out of that we can leverage. And so I love staying on top of that, and I feel compelled that we need to. I feel that we need to. That I think the thing that's hardest is that business moves really fast, and scholarly research doesn't move as fast, and so I try and stay grounded, but I wish there was a way to make the publication process faster there. And I also really like some of the more consulting journal articles that are really grounded in case studies and applications. Those are really helpful for guiding
Mm.
my work and my practice
Why are they helpful in particular?
because it's about translating science into applied situations. And so
Mm.
it takes you through the process of how they do that.
Fascinating. Okay. Well, let's do some what am I reading? And I see you as a pretty cool person, Gina. Fun fact is, one of the reasons why Gina and I got to know each other is because we shared some inappropriate stories, and that's why I think we which I won't be sharing here. But that was a funny way of getting to know you. But
Mhm.
first article I've got here, which has the shortest title of any academic article I've ever seen, it's just called "Cool People," and it is in the Journal of Experimental Psychology. And I mean, I'm talking about hard hitting science. It came out in this year in 2025, and it says, "What does it mean to be a cool person? Is cool the same thing as being good? Do attributes of cool people vary across cultures?" And so they did a pretty robust study with over almost 6,000 participants across what looks to be about 15 different countries, so that you know that this is generally transferable. And what they found is that cool people are perceived to be more extroverted, hedonistic, powerful, adventurous, open, and autonomous. Whereas good people are seen as more conforming, traditional, secure, warm, agreeable, I can't even say that word, universalistic,
There you go.
conscientious, and calm. And this pattern was stable across all the countries, meaning the concept of cool is crystallized itself as kind of a value or a trait across the globe. So you're a cool person, Gina. What did you think about this article called Cool People?
First of all, I love the title because I find that like there's so many academic articles that have like a monstrous title and then all of these I think they're trying to be cool with their title. Keep it light, keep it easy. I thought this was a fascinating article, especially when it dug into like the history of like where cool came from and like the original ideas around like the emotion regulation piece of it and how that's evolved. Because I had never really thought of like there's the saying cool, like stay cool, like calm, but then
Hmm.
there's this kind of cool where we're talking about where people seem more free and out
Yeah.
there and powerful. And I found it fascinating that it was consistent across the globe. I actually thought cool would be more highly subjective and contextual.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just the power of, the branding of Joe Cool, the cigarette guy. It just became a universal concept. So everybody just, what I'm saying is go smoke cigarettes. That's the key takeaway here. No, no, I don't know. I think it's fascinating. And if you dug into the article, there's actually a section where they talk about like brands like Coca-Cola and some of these concepts that just become universal attributes across the world, and maybe that has led to kind of this homogenization of this concept. And so I thought that was fascinating. I was making a joke about the cigarette thing, but there's actually, I think, a nugget of truth within that. But why don't we let's move on to the next one I've got here. So this one was a big one, and it just came out in Nature. Let me share my screen real quick. And this was from a post by Reese Akhtar.
Mm.
It's from Nature, and it's called "A Foundation Model to Predict and Capture Human Cognition." And so, essentially, what they found is if one model that was created by this firm that they're calling Centaur is a foundation model of human cognition, and they've fine-tuned it to over 10 million choices from 160 behavioral experiments. And the model itself outperforms classical cognitive models, generalizes to new tasks it's never seen before, and even aligns closely with the patterns of brain activity within humans. And so basically, I think if what they're saying is true here, that this model can essentially mimic human behavior almost perfectly, if not at a, which is a weird thing to say, to mimic human behavior at a superhuman level, but it essentially can do that effectively. And so what the article talks about is kind of the implications of, could you run entire psychological experiments on humans without needing a human? And they even, the data set that they had was called Psych 101, with a data set of more than 60,000 participants on over 10 million choices that they'd made across all of these 160 experiments. And so I don't know, this is fascinating. And I wonder, does this have any implications for things like leadership development and training and coaching and, all of that type of stuff too? But what did you think about this one?
Yeah, I thought this was fascinating and like at the same time it excited me and also made me nervous, right? Like seeing this, I was excited because I was thinking about how this could really help with like accelerating theory building, testing out like what I was talking about earlier about research to practice and like how we could get research to catch up to the speed of practice. This could be potentially something that could help with that. But then at the same time, immediately I went to like, what would evil people do with this? And I was thinking about like how, and not that these people are evil, but also like thinking about marketing and tech and immediately like, how could this be used to manipulate human behavior in the future?
Yeah. Well, how do you think it could be used?
Well, like I think like from a marketing standpoint and thinking about that, right? You were just talking about how the past article, like how these narratives from marketing have been influenced cool. So if we can predict and understand like how people will act, then we can get real Machiavellian on it and set up things so that we in ways that we know they'll react that way.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. Yeah, I just think about it in the sense that, like, so we talked about, is it good, is it bad, but let me think about it from like a practical perspective. I just love that it could reduce the barriers to entry to doing good science,
Mhm.
right? Like, what if you could do an entire dissertation worth of research in like 20 minutes? Like, wouldn't that be really cool and
Yeah.
accelerate the developments in psychology and potentially sociology and any of the softer sciences, and maybe even make them truly more quote unquote scientific, since they do get that criticism sometimes of being, not as scientific as other disciplines, if you had this type of model to put forward. And so if I were in graduate school right now, I'd be trying to get access to Synchar or whatever it's called and see if I could use it for my own research. And then even do, I mean, for at least for a little while, there's going to be enough currency in doing kind of like parallel human versus, Centaur experiments to see where the divergences lie. And even doing that type of work, I think would be a helpful scientific endeavor. So I don't know, that does seem interesting to me.
Yeah, that would be nice to do a comparison side by side and see like where the differences fall. I think that they acknowledged this in the article too, that it was trained on weird populations because that's the way most of our research is. And so I think that's a future thing. Obviously, we need to think about too is how do we get away from the bounds of just having it be weird populations.
Yeah, and I always mess this one. It's like Western, educated, industrialized, something, something. I always
Rich,
miss rich.
democratic.
Yeah, okay, democratic. I always mess this up. But sometimes we use acronyms on here. We're like, yeah, everybody listening's gonna know this, and they just think we're talking about like, oh yeah, those people are so weird. It's like
We
no,
talked about cool people, weird
yeah,
people. We're all over
yeah,
the place.
exactly, exactly. All right, I'm gonna hit you with the last one. I'm gonna assume you don't have a care about this one that much, but it is fascinating in my world. And so I'll tee this up in the sense that we, for a while there, in kind of like, let's call it 2022, 2023 timeframe on the podcast, it seemed like every week we had an article about remote work versus return to office versus hybrid versus in person, covering all the research very thoroughly. And so at one point, I just put a moratorium on the podcast. We're not talking about this anymore. If people
Mhm.
haven't figured this out, they need to go figure it out on their own because, like, we've covered so much research here with so many conflicting views that it basically become a political issue of like people are on one side of the issue and on the other side of the issue, and they're never going to see the other side. With that as context, HBR recently published an article by Peter Capelli and Rania Nema called Hybrid Still Isn't Working. And it says, evidence suggests that hybrid is hurting collaboration, exacerbating social isolation, and weakening culture, and here's how to fix it. So I don't have too many thoughts about the article itself. What I had interesting thoughts on was the reaction to the article. The people that are pro remote work lost their minds.
Mhm.
And I, again, there's some names in here like the Nick Blooms of the world at Stanford and folks like that. Basically, because like as far as I'm concerned, Peter Capelli is one of the top scientists in the management field in the world. He can say some things that maybe you disagree with. He can say things you agree with, but he's done some excellent work over the body of his career. And they're basically coming out and saying like, this guy's a fake, he's a phony, he doesn't know what he's doing, he's biased. Yeah, like and the thing about it that I wanted to reflect on is I hate it. And I really mean I hate it when science becomes political. I just hate it so much because it reduces us into, because frankly, I think the Capelli and some of the other people that agree with him started name calling the other side too. So I don't think that they're guiltless in this equation as well. And maybe he is biased a little bit in this research. I don't know. I kind of don't care because honestly, I feel like this is kind of a settled discussion at this point. But the point to me is I really hate it when we kind of are throwing stones at different people that are on different sides, because what is so interesting to me about it is how people fail to see their own motivated reasoning on their own side. And it's because they will not acknowledge that the like research that is counter to their point, or maybe rebuts them effectively, they'll act like it doesn't exist, and then they always accuse the other side of suffering from that same disease. And to me, it's like this recursive cycle is just really stupid and anti-productive in my opinion. So I just like, hey guys, let's quit it. How about that? I don't know. What did you think about this one, Gina? Again, I assume you work in person, you work in the NFL, you probably don't have a dog in the fight of what's going on with return to office, but did you have any thoughts about this one?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so I am fully in person now, but at Cleveland Clinic, we were hybrid. So I experienced that for many years as well. And I feel like whenever I see this, if something's not working well, then what are we going to do about it? Instead of just like complaining about it, it's not working. Okay, well, we know what to do. especially those of us who are IO psychologists, like we know what to do to fix this. We need to assess the situation, figure out what's not working, and we can create solutions for it. So I've seen hybrid work well, but it takes a lot of intention. You can't just do hybrid work and have everybody have a day where they come in and they're all on Zoom calls. And that's not going to work. That's not going to foster any collaboration. So I think it's more a leadership problem and a work design problem than it is that hybrid doesn't work. And so I would challenge people to think maybe about this a little bit differently, because we can figure out how to make things work if we're willing to analyze it and get intentional about it.
Absolutely. And so just because I haven't covered it in probably a year and a half or 2 years, I'll just give my perspective on the hybrid versus remote versus in person. And it is this. My last job, I was hybrid. My current job, I'm remote. And then obviously before the pandemic, I've been in person my entire career. And so I've experienced all three. And the thing about it that I think is, if you're a person who is solely advocating for remote work, you're underestimating the need for collaboration, right? And frankly, I'll just say loneliness. I feel a lack of collaboration and more lonely when I'm remote. A person who solely advocates for in-person work is just living in a stilted universe that isn't in touch with the reality of people's complex lives. If you're a person who's only focused on hybrid and you think hybrid is the greatest end all be all, you already hit on it a second ago, which is sometimes the people you need to actually collaborate aren't even there. And so unless you have incredibly structured and regimented hybrid work, it's not even that great. And even then, you have to take such a heavy handed approach as an organization to make that happen that it probably causes more problems than it solves. Right. And so my point is, with each of the scenarios, there's pluses and there's minuses. And the folks who aren't willing to acknowledge the minuses of each scenario, in my mind, you're just politically driven, and therefore we don't need to listen to you. And so that's my perspective on it. I don't know. I thought it'd be cool to end there. What do you think about the episode, Gina? Was this fun? Is this cool?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We're done already? Did we spend our time?
I think we have spent our time. I think that you're absolutely fantastic. I think that Arizona Cardinals are super lucky to have you, and every other NFL team should be adopting what you're doing there as a part of what they're doing as well in their organizations. I think you are the new competitive advantage for firms in the NFL. But any parting words for the audience and anywhere they can find you, maybe about your coaching business or any of the things that we're talking about here?
Yeah, absolutely. So by the time this is live, my website will be up. My LLC has been put together for a little bit, but I've been lagging on getting the website. So if you are interested in doing executive coaching or development with me as an individual or as an organization who's looking for some advisory there, you can find me at Stella Polaris Executive Development. So the website is stellapolarisexecdev.com.
Fantastic. And if you are interested in our training academy, it is not live yet, but I do have a wait list on my website on colenapper.com. So check that out. But Gina, you've been amazing. Thanks so much for joining Directionally Correct. You've been listening to Directionally Correct, a People Analytics podcast with Cole and Scott. And today's guest, Gina Thoebes. Thanks for joining us, Gina.
Thank you.